Welcome to Honoring the Journey. I'm Leslie Neese, and I'm so excited today to honor the journey of a fellow choir person. And when I say that, that's the place that is publishing my book, and also they help here with the podcast through Choircast. And Michael Camp is with me today, and he is going to share his journey. And man, we were just having a conversation right before, so I know you're in for a treat. This guy is really, really cool. You're going to enjoy him. So, Michael, welcome to Honoring the Journey. Glad you're here today.
Thanks, Leslie. It's great to be on your program.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a brand new program. We're this is season 2, I believe, at this point, but man, it has been such a journey. I'm really glad to have you here though, Michael.
Yeah, we're going to have a great conversation.
Yes, we are. Okay. So today, I just want to tell you a little bit about our guest, and then we're going to get into some really good stuff. I not only want to hear about your journey, Michael, but I also want to talk just a little bit about deconstruction and what it actually means. Because I think
Right.
people get a lot of misinformation from certain people, and I just kind of want to talk through it with somebody who did it. I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years now, so I think you have a little bit of experience, which would make you, I believe, an expert.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about that as well. But I want to tell you a little bit about Michael. He's a former evangelical missionary, and I think you were in Africa. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah. 25 years in the evangelical movement as a Baptist, an independent, a charismatic. He's tried all of it. Um,
Yep. Went
um,
through all the brands, right?
all the brands. Well, you know what I do think? I kind of have too, to be honest. I was Foursquare. I was non-denominational. I was Southern Baptist. I was Baptist, Independent Baptist. You name it. Tried it
Yeah.
all. You
Right.
know.
Yeah.
But anyway, now he has been deconstructing, like I said, about 20 years or so, and he is a faith deconstruction coach. So if you're going through deconstruction, maybe you're brand new at this, and you might need somebody to help you get through it. He would be a great, great resource for you. He's written a few books, one of them called Craft Brewed Jesus, and the other Confessions of a Bible Thumper, which I love the title of that. And his latest book is called Breaking Bad Faith. And I love the title of that too. One of my favorite TV shows ever was Breaking
Right.
Bad.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's what it's supposed to do. You go,
yeah,
oh
it was very familiar. I was like, oh, I know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So welcome. So glad you're
Thank you.
here. And
Thank you.
so tell me a little bit about Michael. Like, where did you grow up? Were you always in a Christian family? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I mean, actually, when I grew up in New England in Massachusetts. Not exactly the Bible Belt, but
Yeah.
but the Jesus movement was going across the country. It was the 1970s, and you know, Jesus freaks were showing up, and my family actually we started in a Methodist church, and from my mom, she was from Virginia, and she was like, these Methodists up here in the north are just too liberal, right? So she finally found a good conservative evangelical Baptist church down the street. They said, okay, this is the real thing, right? And so
Mhm.
she joined that, and by then I was I don't know, 14 years old when she started going to that church, and she got me into the youth group. And so I was introduced to the evangelical the gospel, the four spiritual laws. A youth group went to Dallas, Texas. And I'm going to date myself. Expo 72. I was only
Mm.
15, and that was like a week-long Jesus festival, right at the height of the Jesus movement. And I was
Mhm.
introduced to Billy Graham and Jesus rock groups and,
Oh,
all
wow.
these things. And basically, there was a message there that was, Michael, you're not going to find peace in your life unless you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, right? And
Mhm.
then half the people were carrying around this book called The Late Great Planet Earth along with their Bibles at
Hmm.
this
So it
Jesus
was like a
festival.
companion?
It was
Oh,
so
nice.
popular then. The rapture theology was so popular back then,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's when A Thief in the Night came out, this movie and stuff.
Oh,
I
no, I
didn't
know
I
that
didn't
movie well.
I didn't see that movie, but I got, I
You
got all
didn't?
I didn't know that at least, they didn't show that movie, but
Huh.
I heard about it, and it was controversial. Some people said, "Ah, it was too much," and some people said, "No, it was good." But it was the same theology. We got the same theology
Mhm.
was preached, it just in different forms, right? So,
Right.
anyways, eventually I got into the church in my college years. I had some personal issues I was struggling with, and I thought that, the answer was just to join an evangelical church, give my life to Jesus, and, that was what I was missing, because that's kind of what was preached at me for years and years,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Right. So, that happened when I was, a junior in college, and I joined, a group called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and also an independent evangelical church. And, there were some good things about it. It was a nice community. I was kind of welcomed in like a prodigal son, like, what? You used to party hardy and now you're a Jesus with us. And, like, they thought that was so cool. And I was very sincere. I
Hmm.
was extremely sincere. Um, I almost felt like I was more sincere than some of the evangelical Christians I hung out with, because I
Yeah.
would read, like, the first time I read the Gospels seriously, I walked away and I go, "Man, you have to be a pacifist to follow Jesus." And then I realized all the people in my church, none of them were pacifists. None of
Yeah.
them.
How
And
is this working?
they're saying, "No, no, no, Michael, let me show you what this means." He's not talking about governments and armies when he says love your enemies. He's talking about individual people. When you're living your life, yeah, you love your enemies, but we can still go to war, right? And we can still
Yeah.
do all
Gotta
this other.
fight. Gotta
Right, right.
fight.
So
Yeah.
so you get mixed messages, but no, that was then I realized the evangelical movement, um, is a very strong culture that does not really, in my mind, it does not take certain things that Jesus taught seriously. It just
Mm.
doesn't, right? They say they
Mm.
do, but they really don't. And
Give me an
it.
example. Give me an
Oh, I
example.
think the pacifism
Yeah.
passage would be one. What Jesus taught about the Torah, basically saying, you've heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And then if you go back and look at that passage, it says, show no pity, life for life.
Mhm.
And and then Jesus says, no, love your enemies, don't resist them with evil, resist them with love and challenge them, but
Mm.
don't use violence, and don't do reciprocal violence.
Yes.
And but evangelical theology is very retributive. Jesus is going to come back and get you if you're not saved. They're very tough on crime, and now they're pro-gun, and all these things that really contradict at the core of what Jesus was teaching. And
Yeah.
so I guess when I got into the church, like I said, I was very sincere. I became a missionary to Muslims, and that really opens up your mind,
Yeah.
because evangelicalism is in a bubble, okay?
Mhm.
And they don't want you to hang out with, people unless you're trying to evangelize, and non-believers unless you're trying to evangelize them. Well, when you go on the mission field and you live in a 99% Muslim country,
Mm.
right? You start to look at the world differently, because, like, wait a minute, this doesn't make
All
sense
of
that
these people are going to hell?
all these people are going to hell and all their ancestors are already in hell, and
Waiting
all,
for them? Yeah.
right. And so it just doesn't make sense. And wait, I grow to love these people. I feel like I have the love of God for
Mm.
these people.
Yeah.
And then your theology doesn't line up. So I called that my deconstruction light. As I was still a very dedicated evangelical, I had all these things like that where I
Mhm.
started to they were red flags for me. I start to question
Right.
things.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that you're saying this because I came to Utah, which is, very Mormon, very LDS, and I
Right.
was, kind of starting to deconstruct my faith before I came here. But like when I came here and then started to be a little more vocal after a few years about my deconstruction, I had people say, "Oh, I knew if you moved to the land of the Mormons that they were going to get you." It's like they didn't get me. I'm not Mormon. I'm not LDS. I just
Right.
realized everybody thinks they're right. Everybody is convinced that their way is the only way. And
Right.
I'm pretty sure that as long as you're trying to seek God, either we're all right or we're all wrong. But like, yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like we're all just trying to do the same thing based on the culture and the people that we're around and what they've taught us.
Oh yeah, right. And people grow up with it, whether it's LDS or evangelicalism. So many
Yeah.
people grow up in it, and that's all they know.
Right.
or they come to into it in their formative years when they're impressionable and they're going through some
Yep.
kind of life crisis, and this community says we have all the answers,
And we
and
love
so they
you.
and we
You get
love
love
you.
bombed. Yeah.
Yeah, you get love bombed and you feel good. Hey, this is
Yeah.
good, and then I started going to for me, I started going to some really cool churches, I thought. The
Mhm.
Vineyard Ministry I was involved with, and it's like, wow, they brought rock music into the church and all this stuff, and when I was very early on, Bob Dylan
Oh,
supposedly
yeah.
converted, so I was like, "Man, this is
Oh,
a
I
sign from
remember
God."
that. I remember hearing that. That's
Right,
interesting.
right. Yeah,
Did
so
he
I was
ever
like,
deconstruct, I wonder?
well, I'm sure he did. He must have
Yeah.
deconstructed, but,
Yeah.
he's kind of he
Interesting.
doesn't really share very much what's going on
Mhm.
deep in his life, but anyways, I was a big Keith Green fan, and Bob Dylan was on one of Keith Green's albums.
Loved Keith
Right, right,
Green.
yeah, so
Loved him. Yes.
right, so anyways, yeah, it's kinda like that. Everyone, I mean, there people are saying, "Hey, we figured it out. We've got the answers to everything."
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
whether and it could be another stream of Christianity, or it could be LDS, like you said.
Right,
But,
yeah. But somebody has
but
the answers.
right, but that's the thing is like, wait a minute. They say certain things about certain doctrines that people believe, whether it's original depravity or it's penal substitutionary atonement or it's the
Mm.
inerrancy of the Bible. If you look, one of the things that really helped me is that when you go back and study history, the history of Christianity, you
Yes.
realize, oh, wait a minute, they didn't go
100%.
back far enough. If you
Yeah.
go back farther, that's
Yeah.
not true,
That's not
right?
what they believed. Penal
Right.
substitutionary atonement, for instance, the and in case you don't know what that means, it's like Jesus came to die for your sins and his blood covers you and now you're acceptable to God.
And he's a
If
substitute. He's a
he's a
substitute for.
substitute, he's the
Right.
scapegoat.
Right. Yeah.
So that's penal substitutionary atonement. Did not even come into play until the 1600s. And so, like before that, it wasn't even part of the Christian doctrine. So I don't know why that is the end all of all. That and the rapture theology was the 1800s. And then
Right.
we've got the doctrine of hell, which definitely was not original,
Hmm.
Christianity. All of these things that put fear into my heart as an evangelical
Exactly. It's a very
weren't
fear-based
even, like,
faith.
something I had to believe,
Yeah.
and I thought they were, and it was
And
scary.
yeah, and that's it. It was very fear-based,
Mhm.
and because then that's how you get manipulated and programmed. It's like, "Oh, I'm afraid if I die tonight, or if I
Right.
die, I won't be going to heaven. I'll respond to that, right?
Yeah.
I'm afraid of judgment. I'm afraid of the rapture. I'm afraid of not, of falling away, of not being a good enough Christian." All
Yes,
these kinds of
yes,
things, and they talk about having, "Oh, well, you can have the assurance of salvation, but it really isn't. And
mm-mm.
it's not assurance that your friends and family are gonna be saved. You're worried
Yes,
about them."
and if you're an empathetic person, that is
Right,
the hardest part of Christianity. For me, like,
right.
people and it's funny because do you come across people even today, Michael, where they're still evangelical? I get it, I love you if you believe that stuff, I understand why. However, like, they always wanna question me about my f they're like, "What do you mean you were afraid?" It's almost like you weren't doing it right if you were afraid.
Right.
And I'm like, "You're not doing it right if you're not afraid. What are you kidding me? This didn't scare you for people that
I
you love?
Yes, that's
Are
true.
you out of your mind?
Right.
Why are you not out there screaming from the rooftops? If you really believe what you believe is true,
Yeah.
you should never, ever relax. You
Right.
better
No, if
be
they
on
really
your
believe
game."
in
Yeah,
hell deep down, why wouldn't they be truly trying to help
truly.
their family and friends get
Yeah, it makes
saved
no
before they
sense.
go die and go to hell?
Yeah,
Right,
like, what do you
right,
is it
right.
just, "Well, oh, well," no, no, and then there's the theology, I think it's Reformation or whatever, where you're Reformed theology where you're basically chosen, right? And like,
Yes.
so then why even bother telling people? Because if they're not chosen, they're not gonna go
I
anyway.
know, it doesn't make any sense at
It's
all.
just
Right.
all
Right.
so fear-based, you
Yeah.
guys. Ugh.
It's yeah, it's fear-based, and when you deconstruct it, you see so many things that just don't make any sense. I remember distinctly, going into, an Assembly of God church to visit, and, they were the guy preached about, falling away, and,
Mm,
how we need to stay on the path of Jesus, and I walked out of there so frightened, I couldn't believe it. I thought, man, they didn't teach this in the Baptist church. What is this about? Right?
Mhm.
I thought, man, if all of a sudden this fear of hell came over me, like I could
Mhm.
fall away. That's even possible. I don't understand. And I had a revelation early on in my evangelical experience when I realized that even though they were teaching generally the same doctrines, right? Right.
Right.
I realized that I was naive into thinking,
Mm.
oh, yeah, if I read the Gospels, everyone's going to love their enemies. We're going to be pacifists. We're going to
Yeah.
do this. And then you realize, no, they don't believe so many things that are in the scriptures, or they don't
Mhm.
practice them, or they reinterpret them, or they twist them or something.
To
And it
fit
was
the
like,
narrative, yeah.
right. So I thought, oh, everyone's going to believe, if you're a true Christian, you're going to believe everything the same way. No, you've got charismatics, you got non-charismatics, you got rapture. Is it pre-rapture, mid-rapture, post
So
post-trib,
I
and all
know,
this
and
stuff, you know?
and then you get whatever camp that you fall into, you are, immediately boxed into that and judged. "Oh, wait, you don't believe in preacher? Oh, wait, you do believe in preacher?" And then all of a sudden,
Right,
it's like levels of who's
right,
smartest and who's got it best and who knows the most, and
right.
it just was
And then there's
exhausting.
the heresy hunting,
Mhm,
where if you go outside the lines that are very narrow,
mhm.
uh, and you question certain things, then it's like, well, that's really dangerous. Don't go
Yeah,
there. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And people today are just coming to me now that I'm being more vocal and sharing, which is funny. I think initially I didn't want to do that because I don't like making people sad or upset or scared and I feel like that's all I'm doing anymore to my former evangelical friends who I love. But I'm to the point. At first, I think I started being vocal because I wanted them to hear from me, like
Yeah.
from where I'm at. I don't want you to think I'm who I used to be. I want you to understand that I'm in a different place now. But
Right.
now, the more I'm learning and the more I'm growing, I think it's because I know they're afraid, even if they say they're not. And I want them to know they don't have to be.
Yeah. Right.
And
No.
it's genuinely, actually, I think I know the good news now. It doesn't have
No,
bad
no,
news attached to it?
I know. No, it's true. It's like when you deconstruct a lot of harmful theology, you come out and
Mhm.
you go, "Wait a minute, there is a healthy message here."
Yeah,
Right? And
totally.
people are missing it. And
Yeah,
it's universalist, it's
mhm.
inclusive, it's all encompassing,
Yeah.
and it's not fear-based,
No.
right?
No,
And
and I'm not afraid of death. Like, before I was like,
yeah,
"What if I said the prayer wrong? What if I think we don't know what our heart only God knows our heart. So, like, what
right.
if I didn't say it
You
right or
don't
I
trust
didn't really
yourself.
mean it, even though I
Right, you
think
don't
I meant
trust
it?"
yourself. Right, yeah, right.
No, and you're taught not to, so
Exactly, yeah.
whew, it's a lot. So you grew up kind of in that vein of evangelicalism and kind of were tossed around a little bit. When did you say, I know, like 20 years ago, what was the point where you were like, I just can't do this anymore?
Right. Well, there were a lot of red flags along the way. I
Mhm,
questioned hell, but I didn't totally reject it. I questioned the inerrancy of the Bible, but I still thought the Bible's pretty much true about theology, at least.
mhm,
And I saw some issues along the way, but really what started it for me was when I was on the mission field. Um, and I saw it, and one of the other red flags was church abuse. I started to see church
mm,
abuse, and with the charismatic apostles movement,
mm,
being controlling, high control religion. And so I had an experience in the mission field where I worked with someone who was a very high control freak, um, and basically my way or the highway,
mm,
and very condescending and very spiritually abusive, and
mm,
the way that he related to people. He was uh, a leader on our team, etc. And I experienced that, and I didn't get support I needed, and what we really needed to do. It was a very toxic environment, and it was very unhealthy, right?
mm,
But it was like this mentality was, wait a minute, you know, God called you there. This can't be wrong. You
mm.
prayed. This is where God led
You
you.
felt peace. Yeah,
Right, this is where you're supposed to be. Ho If it's toxic and really bad, that means all those you have to rethink all that,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Right, and no
Yep.
and most people don't wanna go there, right?
Nope.
So people were saying, you got to stay in this, and other people were saying, no, this is bad, you got to get out. But then it was it was a very difficult time. I went into clinical depression. My wife and I really struggled through this because we weren't on the same page, and it was a really difficult
Yeah.
experience.
That sounds
And
hard.
and what I often say is that sometimes when people deconstruct,
Mhm.
something very emotional or very painful has to happen for them to really have a breakthrough and say, okay, I really have to question this really in depth, right?
Yeah.
Because until then, it's your world. It's like
Right.
you feel insecure if you're going outside that bubble, right?
Yeah,
Well, at
exactly.
that time, I started to really deconstruct much more in depth, and that's what started the journey. And I don't know, there was a lot of issues going around, but the doctrine of hell was one of the major ones.
Mhm.
And when I deconstructed it just opens up your mind to all kinds of things that you just never thought of before that are beautiful,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I remember
Yeah,
when
they're
I first
actually
started deconstructing hell, I was like, "Wait, I can do this? Wait,
right,
I can question this?" And
right.
it felt really naughty, and then it felt really good. I
Yeah,
was like,
right, it
"Wait a
feels
minute."
naughty and then it feels good. That's great, I love that. You're being naughty, Leslie.
I'm being so naughty. I'm questioning something that really makes no sense at all. But,
Right,
I mean, it
exactly.
felt really good to do it, and that and
Yeah.
and the answers were not what I expected. I thought I was gonna, go and ask the questions and find out that it was true. And when
Yes,
I
right,
asked the questions, I went,
right.
"Oh,
Well,
wait a
no,
minute."
and there's a sense of feeling, betrayed, like,
Yes,
w
very much so.
when I read, I think it was Thomas Talbot's book, The Inescapable Love of God.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but
Mm-mm. No, but it
that
sounds
just
great.
it just opened up my heart, my mind to thinking, "Wait a minute, um, actually, right, these words that were mistranslated in our Bibles,
Mhm.
actually, right,
Yeah,
the early church, most of them believed in universal reconciliation.
yeah,
Actually, you find all these facts and you feel betrayed. Like, wait a minute, you told me that this book, the Bible, was on 100% true, can be trusted, and then the people who translated it made mistakes in translation,
yeah.
and the evidence is really strong.
Yeah,
This is
it's
not
not
just
even
some
this isn't
quirky.
just an opinion. You
It's
know what
not
I
just
mean?
yeah, right, some one-off opinion out there or something. The record is really strong, right?
But the
And so
thing is, Michael, think about it though. When you
yeah,
were in it, the way that you answered questions was circular reasoning. You answered
yeah,
questions by looking at scriptures that were interpreted in a specific way, then, you would back it up that way. When
no,
you actually look into it instead of just taking it for what you've been told it means, things are going to start to
right,
unravel,
that's
you
true.
know.
But they don't wanna go there usually,
Mm-mm.
but if something really bothers them enough, whatever, then they might go there, and they might
Right.
and we'd like to tell you that you'll be pleasantly surprised
Yeah.
because it's it's not this terrible, heretical, demonized thing, not believing in hell, right? It's
Yeah.
actually a very beautiful thing, and it matches what Jesus taught
Right.
and
Do you know
matches
And
God's
and
character.
even well, and God, I was gonna say, God's character, you think about it, he says that God is love in the Bible many times.
Right.
So if that's the case, and it says in 1 Corinthians 13 that love is patient, love is kind, and one of the things it says that always confused me is it doesn't keep a record of wrongs.
Yes, right,
And
right.
I was like, wait,
Yeah,
if God is love and love doesn't keep a record of wrongs, why is he keeping a record of my wrongs? Why am I going to go to hell if I don't accept Jesus? Like, hold it up, like, think, don't just assume because you've been told a certain way, like, really think about it. Does that make sense?
right. No,
No.
and you can argue universal reconciliation all from the scriptures. You
Yeah.
don't have you don't even have to go to the history. Well, history makes it even stronger,
Right.
but you can find it in the scriptures, right? But
Yeah.
it's very powerful, but, um, those scriptures, like you said, it's like people start with a theology, and then they
Right.
read it into the New Testament or whatever,
Hmm.
rather
Hmm.
than looking at the original, language, culture,
Yes.
and history of the New Testament, and then deriving your theology from that. So people
Yeah.
are reading it into the text rather than deriving it from the text.
Ooh, that's a really good point.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's why proof texting is so terrible. It's like, "Oh, this is true. Here's that one little scripture. This is true. Here's that one little scripture."
Mm,
That's a really bad way to read the Bible
right. Exactly. Yeah.
because so many things can be taken out of context.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And when I was deep in evangelicalism, the Bible was everything. And it was a
Right.
history book. And it was literally every story is exactly what happened. It
Right.
wasn't mythical. It wasn't a story that could mean something else. It was all historical and very real. And so it was hard for me because I didn't want to let go of God's word. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't let go of God's word. I couldn't let go of Jesus. I couldn't let go of God. I just didn't want to. It all made sense to me, but it didn't make sense to me. Like something
Mhm.
about it felt right, and then something about it felt really, really
Oh, yeah.
wrong.
That's a red flag. Yeah, I had that
Yes.
same feeling.
Yeah.
You read a passage and you go, "Well, it's not exactly telling us what the preacher just said, but it's
Right.
a little bit close. I guess maybe
Yeah.
there's some background information." They know, well, who am I to question this, right?
That exactly. Yes, especially
Right,
as somebody who I don't have a degree in biblical studies.
right,
I just
right,
studied the Bible. You know what I
right.
mean? Like it's so different and I'm a woman. So, yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
there's that.
yep, there's that.
So you broke away. Now you and your wife, are you on the same page now, or how has that worked out?
Not exactly, but much closer. Yeah, much
Good,
closer,
good.
but not exactly. Like you talk about your evangelical friends. I have evangelical family,
Mhm.
friends,
Yep.
my mother, in-laws, and I love them dearly.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've really learned. When you come out of this bubble of thinking us versus them, we're saved, everyone else is lost, right?
Mhm.
When
Mhm.
you come out of that bubble, you can really learn how to love everyone.
Yeah, with
It's
no
like
agenda.
you no agenda, you meet them, are you a human being?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you are loved by me and by God. You're very special.
Yeah.
And heaven forbid if I put you in the them category. Okay?
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? There might be actions that people do that are harmful, and we can
Right.
say, okay, that's bad. But as a human being, we
Mm.
have to treat everyone with dignity and not write them off. And
Yes.
evangelicalism doesn't do that. It
No.
doesn't teach people to do that. It kind of it claims it does,
Yes,
but
yes.
it really doesn't.
Well, it's that I love you, so I'm going to tell you that
It's
you're wrong
conditional. Right.
and
It's
that you need to
conditional.
change in order to
Right.
be
You
as
need to be
amazing as
right.
me.
You
Yeah.
need to adopt our theology, and a lot
Mhm.
of times that's really what it means is to be a evangelical Christian. Saying the prayer and at the altar call is the first step, but then you've got a whole laundry list of doctrines that you have to believe: the inerrancy of
Right.
the Bible,
Mhm.
original depravity, the way that
Yeah.
we do church, and all these other things.
Mhm. Well, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back. And I would like to talk to you a little bit about deconstruction. What does
Sure.
it look like? What is it? Because I think there's a lot of information right now, especially in the evangelical world, where people who really don't know what it is, they've only heard things or made assumptions, but they haven't been through it, are trying to say that it is evil, it's from the devil,
Mhm.
all these things. So let's talk about that when we come back.
Sounds good.
And we're back. I'm Leslie Nees. This is Honoring the Journey, and we are talking today with Michael Camp. And Michael has been deconstructing for I don't know, about 20 years or so. And
Yeah.
and I also know you wrote a review that I read on Amazon for a book that recently came out about deconstruction, written by Alyssa Childers and Tim Barnett. Is it Tim Barnett?
Tim Barnett. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of wrote a review about the book and then had some things to say. And I let's talk about that a little bit because I feel like a lot of times people want to know what it is. They're confused about what it is, but they're listening to people that are telling them things that keep them afraid of it.
Right.
What are your thoughts on deconstruction? Why
Well, I
do
think,
people start this journey?
yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people who deconstruct, perhaps maybe they really weren't a Christian to begin with. Maybe, they have ulterior motives. They're just being selfish and
Hmm. They want to
and
sin.
right, right. They want to sin. They want to, want to go out and, that's, I don't want to do that. I don't want to obey that command because I can't have fun or something like that. Or they just had a really immature conversion experience. They really weren't grounded and everything. And really, in my experience, that's just all those things really aren't true. Because
Mm,
most of the people that I talk to who have deconstructed are very thoughtful people. I know I was very sincere. I know your story. You were very sincere, and
mhm.
we were really called ourselves, followers of Jesus, got saved, felt like we were born again. I had some really profound spiritual
Yeah.
experiences in the
Same.
charismatic movement, right? uh,
Mhm.
but so there's a sincerity there, and those are the kind of people that really don't want to, if you're really sincere, when you see something that doesn't make sense, or you have some cognitive dissonance, it doesn't line up, then
Mm,
you want to investigate that,
right.
right? And sometimes you'll go to, when you start investigating it, someone will give you an answer, and you go, that was not a good enough answer, that was like a pat answer, and I'm
Mhm.
tired of the pat answers, and I want to go deeper.
Yeah.
And that's, for many people, that's what happens. And 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 the other thing is that, a lot of times people start to question things, but then they realize, if I go too far, I might lose my community.
Yeah.
They might literally kick me out of this church,
Mhm.
right? Because I
And they
don't
do.
believe in hell anymore. I don't believe the whole Bible is 100% true. I still honor many parts of the Bible, but I don't believe it's inerrant, right?
Right,
And
right.
then you have this fear of losing the community, and then people kind of pull back. Okay, I shouldn't do that. Um, and I had those experiences where you could, like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm questioning this. That's not a good enough answer, but I'll try to come up with something where I can harmonize it and I can still stay in the evangelical movement. And then eventually something will happen where, no, I've got to go deeper. This
Yeah.
is just not working for me.
It's just
And that
not adding up. Yeah.
it's just not adding up. And then
Mm.
once you get into it, and people are different. People deconstruct differently, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just one or two issues. But when you start getting into it, you realize there's actually a very beautiful thing going on that you never saw before.
Mm.
You can actually, like when you deconstruct the doctrine of hell, you understand, wait a minute, God, to be really consistent, Jesus demonstrated a way to restore people, not to condemn them,
Mm.
right? Not to use retribution, not to be
Right.
violent, whether it's physical violence today, or spiritual violence in eternal conscious torment. I
Right.
mean, right? So all of a sudden, there's this restorative love narrative that, oh, actually, God really is restorative, a loving God who restores and
Mhm.
doesn't, cast people away forever.
Right.
He
Right.
never gives up. He always seeks the lost. He's he or she is
Mhm.
uh, making always leaves the door open for mercy and forgiveness, never closes it forever. And
Right.
you realize that lines up with what Jesus taught,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, that contradiction goes away. It doesn't mean that, God lets really evil people into heaven the first day upon dying or something. It means that whatever God does, he always, like, one of the terms, I love this term, one of the terms in, a New Testament called the Source New Testament,
Mhm.
there's this phrase, eternal punishment. Well, that Dr. Ann Nyland translates that as the rehabilitation of for a time. It's
Hmm.
God's rehab program. It's like, oh, God doesn't send people to hell, right? He
Mhm.
rehabilitates them. He
Right.
puts them, whether that's in this life or the next life, that's kind of a mystery, but that's the nature of God.
Yeah.
He's restorative, not retributive. and
That's
that
so
opens up
true.
your mind.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
that
and
actually
okay.
makes sense.
So if somebody has somebody that they love,
Mhm.
um, and they're evangelical and they're scared because this person is claiming to be deconstructing, how would you speak to them? What would you say to them to make them not so afraid?
Yeah, I think I would say that you have to realize that first of all, people have good motives, and that's why I'm deconstructing, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
Right. They want to know the truth, and they still love God. Okay,
Mhm.
they're starting to look at things a little differently than you are if you're still evangelical. That's okay, right? Christians have been looking at things differently for years. It's just that evangelicalism has made the non-negotiables so narrow. You know, I mean, you have to believe only this way, right? Or we start treating you differently. We start
Yeah.
thinking you're dangerous, calling you a heretic, right?
Mhm.
That is not the way that Christianity has, in the beginning, at least, and that developed hundreds of years after Jesus. That kind of mentality, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, people are sincere. They still love God. So don't freak out, okay? Right.
Don't freak
Now,
out.
it's true that some people become agnostics and atheists, right? But at the end of the day, I've interviewed people who have become atheists and deconstructed. They still have a love ethic. They actually
Mhm.
still follow Jesus's love commands in a different way.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
I find that a lot of people who are deconstructing really aren't deconstructing God altogether. They may say they're atheists, but I think they're just atheists to the God that they were taught about. I
Yes.
feel like a lot
Right.
of people say, I'm an atheist because they want to say, I don't believe in that God anymore.
They don't
But
believe
that
in that God
doesn't
anymore.
mean
Right.
that they don't believe
Eh,
in something,
that's true. And
you
the
know?
other and that's because we're taught, our society and the church is taught an all or nothing way, a black and white way of looking at the world. It's
Right.
the Bible is either all true or it's totally unreliable,
Hmm.
right? I don't believe either of those things,
Right.
right? The Bible still has really good value, right? This religion is true, and all the doctrines about what we say about God is true, or it's like
Right.
you have to throw the whole thing out, right? And so, in that black and white way of thinking is so ingrained in our society, and so people have to realize, oh, there's another way of looking at this, a third way, so to speak. And if you want to look at it that way, you'll be blown away. It's a very beautiful thing to see it
Hmm.
that way. Being certain that your doctrine is the only way to see things is not a very healthy way of looking at the world.
Well,
It's
and
just
then you feel a little out of control when people start with a different narrative than what you believe. And I believe when people start to feel that way, it leads to desperation, which leads to, things that get between relationships instead of bringing them closer. We start
yeah,
to
it
us
does.
versus them.
It breaks down relationships, right. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I mean, people shouldn't be afraid of deconstruction, really. I mean, I know it's a paradigm shift, and
Mhm.
we have to be patient with people. If someone's really upset about their loved one being or deconstructing, we get that. We were
Mhm.
probably like that too, right? At some
Absolutely, yeah.
point, right? We
Mhm.
understand that, right? And you just have to do the best you can in saying you don't have to worry about this really, is like you are, right?
Right.
You're afraid. Perfect
Mhm.
love drives out fear, right?
Yeah.
You're aren't you taught to put it in God's hands?
Mhm.
One of the things that Keith Giles brought up when we had uh, a podcast that talked about Childers' book, he said, the authors of this book constantly conflate um, deconstruction with deconversion,
Right.
right? They think, oh, if you're deconstructing, if you don't believe and the Bible the way we believe it, you are deconverting. You are leaving historical Christianity,
Which means you were never there in the first place.
which means which may mean you were never there in the first place.
Right.
And then,
Mhm.
but people who are experiencing deconstruction, they go, no, that's actually just the opposite. I'm coming
Mhm.
closer to historical Christianity,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not deconverting. Actually, most people still have a faith, and most people uh, still have a very a love for Jesus and his teachings, right?
Mhm.
And so it's almost just the opposite. Yes, it's true that some people can swing all the way. The pendulum can swing all the way over, but like you said, it's just it's a reaction to well, I reject this version of God. It's not
Right.
necessarily rejecting the whole concept of God, right?
Right. And I think a harmful thing that I was taught in evangelicalism was the separation theology, like that I am separated from God and I need to be restored to him through, doing this, this, and this, and Jesus is the way and all of that. And
Right.
so I think there was something very detrimental to me personally, thinking that God would create me but not want me around.
Yeah.
Um, and it
Right.
kind of confirmed the narrative as a woman, as a child of divorce, having already feeling like I wasn't enough,
Right.
and then to feel like I wasn't enough for God. And I think one of the biggest, most beautiful, most freeing things that I have learned through deconstruction is that I was never separated from God.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
how can anybody be separated from God and be able to live and breathe? And I feel like knowing that now, I'm just such a different person.
No, that's very true because it's drilled into us that we were, born sinners, and
Yeah.
we're actually very depraved people, and unless we're regenerated by God's Spirit and accept Jesus' death on the cross to atone for our sins and all these things, we're just nothing,
Yeah.
right? And you really feel like it's like, wait a minute, we don't really treat our children that way, do we? Do we treat them
No.
like they're nothing?
We'd be
Like they're
jailed if
depraved?
we sa I mean, I
Right,
want
right,
you to think about, like, why do we put
right.
God in this position of, okay, I am his child, and yet when he looks at me, he can't even look at me because I'm a piece of junk, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so
Because you
he's
got
gonna
too much
take his
sin in your
perfect
life. Right,
child and
right.
murder that child, and then take the blood and put it over me so he can look at me and see that perfect child, but not really me.
I know.
We would put that
That
person in
really is
jail.
disturbing.
And to me, like, when I thought about it outside of where I was, and that I not only believed it, but taught that to people because I was scared for them, it
Yeah,
it kind of messed with me a little bit.
yeah.
Kind of messed with me. And it was a tough, I think, deconstruction. I think the biggest misconception is that people go in it because they're excited. They want to deconstruct.
No, that's another
No.
good point. It's actually it's very difficult to do, but there's something that drives you to do it.
Mhm.
It's not like you
Yeah.
wake up one morning and said, "Oh, I saw some trendy TikTok video. Now I'm gonna deconstruct,"
That's
right?
it. That's all I
Yeah,
needed.
that's all I
Yeah.
needed. No, there's something driving you. It's that drive
Yeah.
to know what's really true. It's a and for many people, it's just to know God better. It's like, this is not
Yeah.
adding up. This can't be the way God is. There's gotta be it's something better, and they're looking at it, and
Mhm.
they're working on it, and it's very difficult. You go back and forth, and sometimes, you decide, well, you might, like you were saying, you might doubt, "Gee, I don't wanna hurt my friends. Maybe I should just stay away from them?"
Right,
But
right.
but you begin this process, and once you start seeing some of the light
Yes.
behind this uh, dark way of looking at God, then you wanna learn more, and so
Mhm.
that's why you keep going. Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And I think don't underestimate how difficult this is on the person going through it. I
Yeah.
know it's difficult to see somebody you love going through deconstruction. I know that's hard for you because of your beliefs, but I want you to imagine letting go of everything, your identity, letting go of your family, your community, your beliefs, everything that you staked your life on is being questioned. That is it's a dark night of the soul. This is the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life.
Mhm.
And for someone to discount it, or to say, oh, she was never really a believer, or to say, she's just trying to sin or whatever,
Yeah.
that people would take something that was so intensely personal and real to me and make it into something, just another sermon point
Right.
of,
And yeah, and they do that as a way of self-defense. They're just
I get it.
defending themselves,
Mhm.
and it because if what you're saying is true, then they're gonna have to rethink things, right? And people aren't if they're not ready to do that, they don't wanna
Mhm.
go there, right? So
Right.
I
And
know
that's
it's
true
difficult for
too.
them too, right? So we have to be patient with each other, I think, but try
Mhm.
to understand and put yourself in the other person's shoes is really good advice, right?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Just remembering as hard as it is for you, it's hard for them too. And the best thing we can do is love each other through this on no matter what your beliefs are. Love
Right.
is still the answer. I have family members who they don't believe the way I believe, but they listen and they appreciate and they know that what I'm going through is mine and they respect that. And then I have family members who won't talk to me about it, just want to talk to each other about me.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and 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 I'll tell you right now, I don't need to convince anybody that what I believe is true.
Yeah,
I just need them to love me no matter what I believe. And when you
right.
realize people love you only for what you believe, it's pretty painful.
That is a very good point. Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why people deconstruct. You
Yeah.
realize I'm being loved for what I believe, not for
Mhm.
who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
And and when you find who you really are and you start walking in that and you start letting go of all the people who loved you conditionally,
Mhm.
it's sad, but it's also very freeing. And I'm able to kind of walk in that now. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about you. Are you in a good place at this point? Do you feel pretty, I don't know. I don't think we ever stop deconstructing. I think it's going to be the rest of my life, but where are you now,
Yeah,
like camp?
yeah, there's always something to deconstruct, but, well, if you read my book, Breaking Bad Faith,
Yeah, no,
shameless
let's talk
plug
about
here,
that. No, I love it.
um,
It's such a good
you
book.
would see where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I learned in deconstruction was Jesus' love ethic is really powerful, and we should still take it seriously. Okay, we're not walking away. At least in my mind, I don't want to walk away from that because it's a powerful message that our world needs. Right?
Right.
It's restorative love, though. It's not retributive. And
Mhm.
once we deconstruct, give yourself permission to look at the Bible differently, we can see that. Once we give ourselves permission to look at some of these doctrines differently, and open our eyes to what some of the history tells us, and what actually Jesus taught in the original languages, etc., then we can start to see this. And when we see it, we see the two voices in Scripture, we see the two voices in our theology, and we can
Mm,
separate the destructive retributive voice from the restorative reconciliation voice,
mm,
and that's a beautiful thing. And so that's kind of where I've landed. I want to land there. And then in my book, the first half of the book, I deconstruct retribution in Scripture and in our theology, and also uncover a lot of these myths that we have about Christianity. Christianity, the way we think of it, right, didn't even exist for like 200 years until 200 years after Jesus. That's what
mm,
most historians have basically said. You know what? This was a different thing during Jesus' time. We just read into the scriptures what we've experienced. We're actually not really following the way of life that Jesus uh, taught, and
mm.
so that just blows your mind away. It's like, wait
It
a
remind
minute, you don't have to. Jesus wasn't, and Paul really weren't Christians. They were Universalist Jews that were
right,
saying, "Everyone come, everyone's welcome." Right?
right,
Let's make this,
right.
live a life of love and build an egalitarian community,
Mm,
right? And it's not an institution. It doesn't have
right.
professional clergy. It doesn't have
Not a
all
system.
this hierarchy. It's not a system. It doesn't have statements of faith. It doesn't have all this stuff. That came much later, right?
Right. Well, it
Right.
kinda reminds me of the game telephone. You
Yes, right.
you
Yeah,
whisper and it goes around. I feel like, throughout the last over
right,
2,000 years, we've been playing telephone,
right,
and maybe
right.
the message got a little tweaked along the
Yeah, it
way.
did. You're asking me where it was now. I don't like to call myself I don't like labels, right?
Right.
Progressive Christian, I'll say that to some people, but I don't like that label because these terms we use are loaded, right?
Mhm.
So I like to call myself a follower of the love ethic of Jesus,
Mm.
but I've discovered that it's not a religion, it's not a system, it's a way of life.
Yeah.
And that way of life can fit into all kinds of other belief systems if that's what you want to do, right? So I give story examples in the book about how certain people have latched onto this love ethic and they're not even Christians or they're
Mm.
just secular or they might be Christians. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. was latching onto the love ethic, restorative love ethic of Jesus in his civil rights movement, right? But other people can latch on to that, and you don't even have to be in this thing we called Christianity, and it's a very beautiful thing. It's just like you treat people with love, dignity, respect, and to the point of loving your enemies. And some of the stories, there's a black guy who won over 200 Ku Klux Klansmen and they gave up their robes, right? They didn't go down the street and say the sinner's prayer and become Christians, but they gave up their robes and now they love black people and respect black people, right?
Right, right.
That's a huge conversion, right?
Right. And
We
that
don't
is
have
the Christ spirit.
we
That
don't
is
have
the
to so
love of
yeah, but
Christ.
do you believe in the deity of Christ? We don't have to do
Yeah.
that because they're
No.
loving,
Mm.
right? And
Right.
then another community, another couple, Jewish couple, won over a anti-Semite bigot, and he ended up converting to Judaism.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
a Muslim community did the same to a domestic terrorist who wanted to blow up the mosque because he hated Muslims because he had just come back from the Iraq war and
Mm.
was programmed to hate Muslims. They
Goodness.
won him over, and he became a leader in the mosque. I mean,
Wow.
and they
Love
were
is transformative.
it's transformative, right? So that's
Mhm.
kind of where I'm at, and we don't we can do that. We can live a life where we use that to just watch. Your agenda isn't to convert people, as this one guy said. They
Right.
kind of convert themselves.
Yeah. Well, and
Well,
that the thing is, would I still wanna be in an evangelical space and with the things that I believe in love now? Yes, I
yeah,
would, because I miss the community, I miss the love, I miss the,
right.
the all of that. However, I'm not welcome there because I don't believe certain things that they believe are deal breakers.
No,
And
that's true. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
sad.
that's very
I'm not
sad.
welcome.
No, there. Yeah, if you are, you're held under suspect, and you, you're
Right.
treated differently, and or
So
shunned or whatever.
yeah, I'm not anti-religious, but religion is anti-Leslie right now.
Yeah,
So,
right,
and that's
right,
okay because I don't
right.
need religion to be light and the hands and feet of Jesus, and I
Yeah,
don't need religion for that. And I think that
no,
was his message, and I think that's why religion and politics got into bed together and had him crucified because his message was you don't need a system, you just need to love.
that's right.
And
Hmm.
so, wow.
No, that's true. Yeah, I make that case in my book. So, and then
Yeah, I'm excited. I love
it's
that.
beautiful. It's a beautiful and when you see the differences, it just, I've had people tell me, "Hey, man, the way you did this, it just jumps out at you, the differences,
Mhm.
and you can start to see it, right?" And
That's
so I
good.
hope that's helpful for people.
And Michael's book, again, is called Breaking Bad Faith. It is available right now on Amazon. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be reading that in the Choirlings. I don't know if you've heard of this yet, but this is a kind of a movement, I guess you could say, a deconstruction community. It's a private Facebook page
Oh, okay.
on the internet called the
Mhm.
Choirlings. And I am the tour guide. So each
All right.
month we're going to be
Okay.
going through a book
Oh, that's
through
nice.
choir. We're going to be going through a book that talks about specifically deconstruction. And not only will we be talking about deconstruction, but we will be talking about it with the author. So it's going to be very interactive. And the only cost of admission is that at the end of the month, you do an honest review on Amazon. That's it.
That's
And you don't even
great.
have to pay for the book. We're going to be giving the book to the people in the group. So
Excellent. Excellent
if
idea.
that sounds like something you want to do, if you're
Yes,
listening, please
absolutely.
go find us on Facebook. It's called The Choirlings,
Mhm.
Quoirlings. And well, I'm sure we'll see Michael's book on there because you're through choir, of course, and your book I think would be a great one to do for deconstruction. So
That's great.
yeah,
I would
so
love it.
so fun. Well, it was great to have you, Michael. If somebody wants to find you online, where would they do that?
Oh, go to spiritualbrewpub.com and you'll find my podcast, my blog. You can contact me there. There's a
All the
faith
links.
deconstruction workshop. Everything is there.
Oh, nice. You have workshops.
Spiritualbrewpub.com. Yep.
So that's fun. Do you do that like once a month or how does
No,
that work?
it's just on demand. I have a 6-hour on-demand workshop, and
Oh,
anyone can sign up for. And then we try to do a little follow-up meetings afterward,
I
the
love
best we
that.
can. Yeah,
That's
and there's
great.
also a evangelical deconstruction support group that's
Mm.
based in Seattle, and we get together Zoom and in person, but anyone is welcome. People from all over the country have joined the
How
Zoom meetings.
fun. That is awesome. I love that. Yeah, I think we're under the impression sometimes that deconstruction means you've lost your community, and sometimes it does, but you can find new community
You
too.
gotta find a new community. It's really important,
Yeah.
and there's communities like this out there, like you were saying, the Choirlings is
Yeah.
another one.
Firelings.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
right.
exciting. Well, thanks, Michael. It was great to have you. I honor your journey. Man, you were a great guest. I love the insights that you gave. And again, if you want to see his book, all those great points are in there. Breaking Bad Faith. It's on Amazon right now by Michael Camp.